interstate to this country?
Well, I
Yes?
think,
No?
I talked about Germany. I didn't talk about beyond all that.
Okay, so, right, during World War II, Adolf Hitler actually did a very good job. He was not a people person, but he certainly knew how to put roads on a country. So he developed the Autobahn, what's known as the Autobahn today, and the Autobahn was designed with one thing in mind: move military quickly throughout the country. That's what it was designed for. Because Germany's idea, especially just prior between World War I and World War II, was to dominate Europe. And the only way to dominate that was to be able to move military might very, very quickly. So when Eisenhower comes back as a hero after World War II, he decided that the United States, because we didn't have anything like this in place, he put the interstate system to work. And he said, in order for me to get funding for this and to be able to get the federal government to pay, because the states didn't want to buy in on this, he said, I need to make sure that all interstate routes either begin, end, or have a military base along its route. Okay? So when you see the layout of the interstates, and of course that's all these red lines with the little blue and red shield there, all those interstates are either on or a military base is connected to them at the beginning, end, or along its route. Always understand that. The other thing that was really nice about the interstate, and part of the funding, because part of our military is aircraft, right? Okay, we have Air Force, and they land planes and things like that. So part of this funding was to make sure that at some point along every interstate route, there is at least 1 mile stretch, and it can be anywhere between 10 to 100 miles, that a aircraft can land without any restrictions, weight, or any instructions as far as like overpasses, power lines, stuff like that. They have a clean shot for a 1 mile stretch. Okay, and again, it was strictly designed just to be able to land aircraft. So you will see, and I think there was no clearer picture of how the interstates work other than 9/11. Because what they did is they shut the interstates down. They took all traffic off the interstates. The Jersey Turnpike, I happened to be up in Englishtown during 9/11. I was delivering. And up near 9/11, we could see the smoke, and all that from up in that area. And when I went to get back on the turnpike, they wouldn't let me on the turnpike. I had to go down 1 and 9, okay, to get out of that Jersey area, and then I eventually worked myself over to 295 and got home that way. But the Jersey Turnpike, which is 95, okay, and it is an interstate, that was completely shut down, and both the southbound and northbound lanes were handling northbound traffic only. So everything was moving one direction towards New York. They were sending every piece of emergency equipment they had up to New York from all over, okay? So literally, I-95, Jersey Turnpike, was handling one direction, nothing but emergency equipment. It was an unbelievable sight, okay? Incredible sight. So our interstate system is really, really interesting how it's laid out. The way to remember the interstate system is the way that I want you to remember mile markers, because mile markers will just become part of your life, okay? Without mile markers, it's very difficult to pinpoint a location for you. So I want you to look at how the interstates are numbered, and this will give you a really good indication of how the mile markers run on the roads. So you have something that used to be years ago, used to call sequential numbering, okay? And what that was, when you got to exit 1 was at exit 1. And then maybe 10 miles, 12, 15 miles up the road, you got to exit 2. Then you got 20 miles up the road, exit 3. Sequential numbering. Okay, so now what they do, with the exception of the Jersey Turnpike, okay, Pennsylvania Turnpike is already converted. With the exception of Jersey Turnpike, we now have mile marker ratings on the exits. So when you get to exit 13 is at the 13 mile mark. Okay, so everything now is actually by the mile. So you know when you get off of an exit or on an exit, that's at the point of the road that you're entering or exiting, which is really kind of nice. It's really very, very good to know and understand where you are. All right. So Out here in California, you have I-5. Runs all up and down the entire West Coast. It's I-5, or what the Californians call the 5. They don't call it I-5, they call it the 5. So it runs up and down the West Coast. The lowest numbered interstate is right here that runs north and south. If you'll also know that the number is odd. So, right, so exactly. So anything that runs north and south is going to be an odd numbered interstate. You know what odd would mean? Okay, that means that you would start with 1, 3, 5, 7. Odd numbers. Okay? Even numbers would start with 2 or 0. Okay? 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay? That would be even numbers. So anything that goes north to south is an odd number. Anything that goes west to east or east to west is going to be an even number. Okay? It doesn't change throughout the entire country. But, all the way up north and south, east, it's exactly that way. So, the important part to remember about the mile markers is that we start at I-4 in Florida and work our way all the way up to, right now it's 96, but 94 was always the cutoff point. So you go from 4 to 94, you go from 5 to 95. Okay? So let's look at a pattern that's happening here. If this is the lowest numbered interstate to the highest numbered interstate, that means that your mile markers, as you go through this state, start on the west side as being the lowest number. And they work their way over here to the highest number. So it's nice when you're coming from the west and heading east because you know exactly how many miles you are through the state. So it's pretty easy to pattern it down. So you understand exactly as you're going across, how many miles you're going to be traveling through these things. If you're coming from the opposite direction in this way, you're going to enter at the highest number. So you say, I'm entering at the 393 mile marker. Okay, well, I got 393 miles to get to the other side of the state. It's quick, it's really easy. As long as you remember how the mile markers are going to be done. And the mile markers never change differently than the way the interstates were numbered. Lowest number on the west, lowest mile marker on the west. Highest interstate on the east, highest interstate at the eastern part of the state.
So going north to south, it would be like mile 1 down here and mile.
That's correct.
Whatever up here.
Exactly, because the lowest numbered interstate is in Florida. Number 4 goes all the way up top to number 94, all the way at the top of the country. So it goes from the lowest to the highest. You enter here at 0, go all the way up here. Okay, so that's the way that the interstates were laid out. It was a very methodical way that they were laid out. So as they started doing all this, and they started putting together the interstates, they realized very quickly putting interstates through cities became a problem. Why? Because of congestion. Interstates were supposed to be high speed. And in order to be high speed and move military quickly, they had to come up with another method. So what they did is they started running routes around these bigger cities. So anything, especially, it's much more prevalent in the east than it is out here in the west. But around your bigger major metropolitan areas, you have what they call loops and spurs. A loop simply leaves the interstate and at some point comes right back to the interstate. So it leaves it and loops around and comes right to the back. What example can you come up with that you know locally that leaves our interstate and comes right back to the interstate? What do you think in this area? Can you remember anything like in especially Maryland? Maryland has the
They got the DC loop.
Exactly, the Baltimore loop, you got the DC loop, you got 495 and 695. 695 goes around Baltimore, 495 goes around Washington, DC. Excellent. Okay, that's the example that would be a perfect example of a loop. They go completely around the city. You don't see anything of the city. It takes you away from all that congestion and keeps you at highway speed. Okay? At some point, once you leave the interstate, it does automatically put you back on the interstate and let you keep going on your way. Okay? Now, a spur, on the other hand, is a totally different animal. What it does is it leaves the interstate and doesn't come back unless you get all the way to the end and turn around. So it doesn't automatically come back to the interstate. The only one in the area that I know is prevalent in our local area is 195. Actually 176 too, but it's an odd number. 195 up in Trenton, okay, goes all the way, excuse me, goes all the way up in this Trenton area and goes all the way across the middle of the state out here to Lakewood. Once it gets out here, it ends. It doesn't go back to 95. Even though this is marked 195, and this came off of 95, it came off the Jersey Turnpike, which is I-95, and it went all the way out here, but it doesn't loop back in. This is a true spur. It goes out and it stops. So your 3 numbered interstates indicate a loop or a spur. Okay, so here's how I want you to remember this. A 3-digit interstate that begins with an odd number, okay, will always be an interstate that is a spur. You'll never find a loop with an odd number. A loop will always be an even number. So if it's a loop, it leaves the highway, comes back, even numbered. If it's a spur, odd numbered. But it'll always be 3-digit, and it'll follow that sequence.
So 540.
Yeah, you're coming off of 40, it's 5, and then it doesn't loop, it spurs out. Okay?
So like 676.
676 is an odd one.
Right.
That's a real odd one. That was actually misnumbered. 476 is misnumbered. Okay? Because the 76 actually should have been what it's even,
Fine.
right? That should have been east and west. How does 476 go? North and south.
Right.
Okay? And it really only connects with 76 from the middle. It doesn't spur off of it because it goes south and north of 76. So you got 76 runs east and west, you know. It should have either been a loop around some area or it should have spurred out and then come back. 476 spurs both directions. It goes north and it goes south because it's 476. It's a 4, it should be an even number. It should go east and west. 476 doesn't go east and west, it goes north and south.
And it's actually called the Northeast Extension.
It's called the Northeast Extension.
Of the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Yep. So it was a misnumbered, it was a white elephant when it was built, believe me when I tell you. Okay, this thing was so antiquated and it took so long to put the Blue Route in. Okay, it's its other name.
And isn't it actually like a spur though?
It is a spur. A 476 is definitely a spur. Okay, it is definitely a spur, but it's a spur that runs in both directions. Okay, because 476 never comes back to 76. 476, okay, Pennsylvania Turnpike runs right into 476, and then you have a choice of either going north or going south. It actually comes into the middle of it. So no, it does spur. It's definitely a spur. You know, it's definitely a spur.
It's odd all around the board.
Yep. So it's just that was an odd numbering. It's the only place in the country that I know that it was done that way. It was just really weird. So, but every place else, you know, you can bank lowest number. That's where the mile markers start. Go all the way to the highest number, and that's where they end. Okay. So a question always comes up: if 4 is along the bottom here, that's the lowest numbered interstate. Okay, that starts in the bottom of the country. Where's 1, 2, and 3? Why did we start at 4? That's really kind of silly. What do you think 1, 2, and 3 is?
I would say North.
How about Hawaii? Because
I
remember,
was gonna say Hawaii.
Hawaii is is part of the United States. You got
And the
Hawaii and
H1
Alaska.
and the
It's an
H3.
H1, H2, H3.
Hawaii Interstate.
Yep, the Hawaii Interstate.
Oh.
Okay,
I looked
same
up-
shield, same everything.
I looked at Alaska. I didn't see
Yeah.
anything.
I've
No,
been,
nothing
I've been to
different.
Hawaii a few times.
Yeah. So that's where Interstate 1, 2, and 3 got to. If you wonder why we started at 4, why didn't we start at 1? You know, or
Hawaii.
why didn't we start at 2? So it's out in Hawaii. You've got H1, H2, H3 is in Hawaii.
Are they all on the same island?
I don't see H2. I see H1 and H2. Where's H2?
There's H1. You'd have to make it bigger so you could see it, but
Yeah, they're all on the small island, the most populated.
yeah,
island.
they're all on the Honolulu.
Right.
They're all on Honolulu.
Through all your population.
Yep.
Okay, so 3 numbered interstates. They either are loops or spurs, depending on what the number is. If it's even, okay, it's going to be a loop. If it's odd, it's going to be a spur. If you are on a north-south interstate, that will be odd numbered. If you're on an east-west interstate, that'll be even numbered. Okay, and you can thank Adolf Hitler for that.
With the exception of 76, which is
With the exception of 76 and 476.
40's an even number. 17's an odd number. That's what he's, so
Yeah, and as you move across, you'll see the
we
numbers.
see the numbers, yeah.
And, one of the ways to really get geographically familiar with the country is to divide the country so that you understand what routes you typically are going to be assigned to in order to make deliveries. All right, you got the 5 out there, and that's commonly what it's called, is the 5, and that you run that a lot out west. 5 and 15 are the two most heavily traveled interstates in the west there. Out here, it's 95 and then 85, okay, out here. So when you look at the amount of interstates that we have, interstates are all over this country, but there are only certain ones that truck drivers use. You'll see that we use 40 a lot, okay, because you can pick it up right here in Tennessee. Comes off of 81, pick up 40 and run 40 for 2,000 miles. You pick up 70, big truck route, 70. You pick up 80 and you pick up 90. All right, so those steps you pick up an awful lot as a truck driver.
I think I've seen a lot of them on 44 too.
You see trucks all over, but I'm saying the most heavily traveled. Okay,
Yeah,
what
because
you're
you
going to
can
be
run
assigned.
this from one end of the country to the other end of the country.
Yeah, I mean they literally run the entire length.
They run the entire length of the country. So right there is Interstate 80. Interstate 80. Look over in PA. Look in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Interstate 80 is right
literally
there.
runs right across.
So it runs right across.
Mhm.
So the interstate was created for commerce to move?
No, interstate was created for military.
Military.
It just so happens we use it because that became known as the National Network of Highways.
So it's military, commerce, then passenger vehicles
Yes,
in terms of usage.
yes,
Yes.
yes. But military first. Military was always its prime goal was to be able to move military might domestically through the United States quickly.
Can you give an example while we're looking at the map? Like, say you broke down, I don't know, somewhere in this area, and you need to call dispatch and tell them your mile marker so they can find you.
Okay.
Just say they don't have GPS on the truck.
Right.
How would I be able to tell them, like, I know that I'm on Route 20, like, say it's Big Springs, you broke down in Big Springs.
Okay.
I'm on Route 20, I know I can tell them that I'm on Route 20, but how would I give them the mile
What was your
marker?
last exit?
Huh.
What was your last exit? That's how you're going to know.
Okay.
Okay.
They're every
Because-
mile too on the highway.
Yeah,
You'll see
every
it
actually
as a
they're
little
every 10th of a mile. Okay.
Yeah, every 10th of a mile they're on.
Right.
So it'll say like 1 and then it'll have a line and it'll have the 3. So that's 1 and 3/10. You get out here farther, it's going to say 30 and 4. So you're a 30-mile marker and you're 4/10 of a mile. All right, and that's how that runs. All right. So it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then boom. Then you're at the next mile marker. When you're at the next highest number on the mile markers.
So and it normally will always be a number, point, and then something else because it's broke down by mile and tenth of a
Tenths.
mile. So you'll always have the tenth of a mile. So typically you'll be able to see the mile marker where you're at. Okay, because you're as a driver, you're always cued into the mile markers. You're always seeing where you are because you're timing yourself. You're saying, okay, I'm at the 170th mile marker, and again, I know that, and when the 214 is the truck stop that I want to get to. So you're always looking, you're always checking, to see the mile markers. And like I said, the way that the interstates are laid out, except for the Jersey Turnpike, okay, the exits indicate at what mile marker you are on that particular interstate. So as you're coming across, you're at exit 160. That's the 160th mile marker. Okay, is where that exit is. So it's important to always be aware of your exits and be aware of your 10th of a mile markers. Okay, because they can get to you quickly as long as you give them a mile marker. They know exactly where you're at.
Coach, as,
Okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
As we
Yeah.
do this, it is 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that are younger are going to believe this is an obsolete, necessary item when we have GPS. Can you speak to that and why it's not necessarily obsolete? It's matter of fact authenticating the GPS.
Where's your exit guide?
Right there, sir. Right behind you. You should be standing on top of it. It should be right near you. All right. No.
It's a little book called the Exit Guide.
I think it's underneath there.
Underneath the
Underneath that piece of paper.
Here it is, Coach, on the table here.
Right there.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay, so let's break this down, and that's a very good.
Because we're all
very
hooked
good
on our
question.
GPS.
We are,
And I got to find a way to
I
have
just
us.
went to a funeral home yesterday because one of our former employees, her husband died, so we wanted to go over and pay our respects. And the first thing I did was feed it into the GPS. But again, you're in your car; it doesn't matter. I can get turned around in the driveway. But the interstates are interesting because they're so concrete that they can make a book like this. And actually, now this is on your phones. You can bring this up on your phone. There is a cost to it. But it's an app you pay for. And the next exit is simply a book that outlines every exit of every interstate in every state of the union. Okay? The nice thing about it is what's off that exit. Because you're driving, and like you said, you're going through and you're going through Texas. When you're coming through 40 in Texas, there's stretches in 40 that are just absolutely nothing there. And all you're doing is going across the chimney. Okay? 40 comes across the north side of Texas. What about if we get on I-10? All right? You got I-10 goes all the way across here, go all the way. You're at the longest part of the state. There's 200 and 300 mile stretches on 10. There's nothing. There's not even cell service. Okay? So the idea is, where do I need to get off in order to get services that I'm looking for? Our drivers got it made because there's Walmarts all along the eastern seaboard. They get up here, they're 3 miles away from one. They're most of the time they're really near a Walmart where they're keeping their trucks. So there's always a place to go in and resupply your truck for food and different toiletries that you need and stuff like that. But if you're out on the road, where am I going to stop at? Where am I eating today? Okay, because very likely when you're out on the road, you're going to eat breakfast up here, okay, someplace. You might not get lunch until you get close to maybe North Carolina or a southern part of Virginia, and you might wind up dinner tonight down around a lot of South Carolina. Okay, so if you're not familiar with those areas, then it pays to have something that tells you, hey, what's off here? More importantly, it tells you where the truck can fit. It's just because you want to be there doesn't mean you can. Okay? So inside here, it shows you by every state, okay, and every interstate of that state, and every exit of that state, of what's off the exit. So I'm really having a problem with diarrhea today, okay? Where can I go get a drugstore? And can I get a truck anywhere near it? Okay. Well, if I see that there's a CVS, or there's a Rite Aid or a Walgreens, and also off that same exit there's a Walmart, I can either go to the Walmart and do what I got to do, or I can park my truck at Walmart and see how far it is to walk to the drugstore. Okay, if that's where I have my prescriptions or whatever. Okay, so this is where this book really comes in handy. And at each exit, you'll notice that it has the exit number. Well, guess what? Because it's the way the book's laid out, that's also where your mile marker is. Okay, that's why it's very important to always know what exit I just passed and where my mile markers are, because now I can actually I can plan my whole route out of this book, because I know where I want to be. I just got to find out if it's okay for me to be there. Okay, pretty cool, huh? I mean, that's, very few people know that books like this even exist.
Do they still make them? I know that says 2015.
Yeah, what they did is I think they discontinued this in 16, and they went to an app on the phone. So they're not publishing it anymore, because I can't find it. Okay, if it's being published, I can't find it because I went back and
I've
get
looked
updated
one for
books.
the last 3 years. I
Yeah.
can't find one. I have the app.
Yeah, and there's also another one called the Truck Stop Guide, and it was just a little tiny book, okay, that had every truck stop listed. Well, we only use Pilot Flying J's, and on the legend there, the windowsill in there, there's a book that lists every Pilot Flying J in the country.
Yeah, you had it this morning. You have it there. There you go.
Yep, there it is. So there's a lot of help for truck drivers. You know, there's just so much help out there. There is no reason to be lost. There's no reason to be messing stuff up and